targeting Black and Latino MSM. My name is Marnie Castillo. I work at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia with the Adolescent Initiative, and I'm very honored to be moderating this morning. We have such an esteemed panel of colleagues that I have the greatest respect for, and I know we're going to be able to share a lot of good information with you this morning, and also intellectual information as well. With you this morning, and also the session this morning, I'm going to turn it over to Derek Gibbs from Blackman. So the session this morning, I'm going to turn it over to then we'll have our panel introduce themselves and go through some questions and then take some of your questions from the audience. So I'm going to turn it over to Derek.
Good morning, everyone. So, we're talking about implementing effective behavior interventions targeting violence. So first, let's talk about the DEBI project. The DEBI project is the Fusion of Effective Behavioral Intervention project. So this is a CDC funded program to disseminate effective behavioral interventions to CBOs and health departments. The interventions are scientifically proven to be scientifically research-based and proven to be effective. They're packaged by the CDC in these user-friendly kits. So these user-friendly kits include the communication manual. So these user-friendly kits on the website. They have resources for assessing your agency's ability to actually implement the intervention. They have all the resources for your monitoring and evaluating tools as well. So that's the DEBI project. So now moving on to what is a behavior intervention. As I said earlier, we're talking about an intervention that's research and evidence-based with the goal of promoting health, health outcomes to increase. It's to promote healthy behaviors with the goal of people participating in interventions to engage in less risky behaviors with focus on risk reduction. And it seeks to help the participants change behaviors or their knowledge, attitude, beliefs, and values as well. So there's 3 levels of behavior interventions. We have the individual level, we have the group level, and the community level. So the intervention, the individual level, it's basically an individual section. It's one-on-one. Then you have a group level, which is usually 7 to 12 or 8 to 12 participants. And in the group level, it's really about group sharing, the participants learning from each other, practicing skills or skills building. And then the community level, it seeks to really change a social norm within the community. So either change the values of the community or change the social norm. So some of the interventions listed are ones that are somewhat specific to MSM. Clear on the individual is I don't want to say the wrong information. I know it's a lot of sessions as individuals, so it really needs to find where they're at to help them assess the risk and move forward in the whole process of behavior change. And for the group level, many voices is one of the most probably prevalent group level interventions targeting MSM and YSM. And then you have street smart and community level empowerment, which is really about empowering the community to be change agents as well as you recruit popular people in their social networks to go out and diffuse these, whatever the social norm is that you're trying to change in the community. So it's really taking that approach of engaging the community in HIV prevention. We all know that sometimes as service providers, the information that we give is effective, but it's not as effective as you know. And the same thing for popular community. You identify people who are popular in their social networks. And the same thing for popular community to change the social identity. So, why evidence work? We're going to talk about some of the targets, behavioral determinants. So these are factors that are known or believed to determine HIV risk behaviors. Reasons why people engage in behaviors that transmit HIV. And so we know that some of these factors include things on the inside and also the things on the outside. So some of the things on the inside is their knowledge, their beliefs, things on the outside, social norms of the community that you live in, race So, two types of outcomes for an effective behavior intervention. We have the immediate outcome. And so with the immediate outcome, that's to happen during the intervention or shortly after that intervention. So it's an increase in knowledge, it's an increase or the hope of adapting a skill that they've learned on the intervention. And then the short-term outcome, which hopefully will turn into a long-term outcome, happens when the participants have natural opportunities to practice the skills that they've learned throughout going through. So one of the objectives of the workshop is to talk about the difference between effective behavior intervention and traditional knowledge-based health education. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So one of the good things about knowledge-based health education is we know that it meets individuals where they're at. So it's not necessarily, you can modify that to fit the client's needs a little bit better than with effective behavior interventions. They're easy to adapt to meet the community's needs or to meet the community in whatever the setting is. And also they're localized and indigenous to the community. So an intervention that was, let's say DEUP was done in North Carolina, in Durham. The research was done in Durham. So the needs or the community, the values or the norms in Durham are different from Philadelphia. So we have a Philadelphia based, workshop or intervention or knowledge. It's going to be more effective. Not necessarily more effective, but it could be more effective and it's more specific to the community that you're in. They rely on knowledge, which in itself is not always influenced behavior, versus when you think about behavior intervention, we're hoping to, it's not only what they gain from the intervention, but it's also building and changing their, not only just the knowledge, but the beliefs, the values, skills, all of this stuff. And sometimes knowledge-based health education is not always evidence-based. It's different from behavioral interventions. They're not necessarily rigorously evaluated. And so another difference is sometimes we think that knowledge is often believed to influence behaviors. That's not always the case, because if we look at the epidemic as it is, people know about HIV, they know how it's transmitted, but yet that in itself is not going to particularly lead a person to behavior. So that's pretty much it for the overview of behavior intervention. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Marnie and we're going to get into the panel.
So we will have questions to the end, but here's contact information that you can jot down for later. And as I mentioned, I work at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and are conducting HIV prevention research for adolescents, especially young men who have sex with men. So fortunately, I've had the opportunity to work with all the men, or the young men on this panel, and learn from them and see what they're actually doing in the community. So it's I think you'll be hard pressed to find a more knowledgeable group in which to hear from. You'll be hard pressed to find a better looking panel than what we have in front of you. And without further ado, I want them to introduce themselves. So Chris, could you start us, please?
Wow. So good morning, everybody. My name is Christopher Collins. I work for the Mazzoni Center. I run an intervention called HYPE, which is helping you through prevention education, which is formerly known as Many Men, Many Voices. We changed it due to the CDC's, how the CDC targets transgender people in regards to them still being categorized as MSM and the non-human people in the city of Philadelphia basically don't have a type of it seems like right now they don't have a barrier to who they are having sex with. So HIV is an epidemic throughout the whole city, so why not help all young people in the city? My target population is specifically Black MSM though.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard. I am, the name of my agency is called Safeguards. We are implementing the community level intervention called DEUP. We actually renamed it to Brothers United Philadelphia. We're a CDC funded community level intervention. And
Good morning, I'm Jay Grant. I'm from the Adult Youth Center. We deliver empowerment, which is a community level intervention. We're actually 3 different tiers, formal outreach, community level intervention, and formal outreach events, and community level intervention and social. Our target population event is specifically gay and bisexual males with an emphasis on Black and Latino men.
Hi again. I'm Derek. I work for the Youth Health Empowerment Project, or otherwise known as YAP. I work for our AEM initiative, and we are in the process of implementing POL, which is popular opinion leader, and our target population is African American, Latino, white mixed between the ages of 13 to 29.
Thank you. I have a few questions just to get us started, and then we'll open up to our audience here, which is also a pretty good looking audience, I gotta say. I want to start off with Jay, if you could just kick us off with this first question, which is what are effective strategies for recruitment and retention of young MSM of color into CLIs or community level interventions and group level interventions?
I think the most effective strategy I've seen is actually involving the young people specifically from the target population you're targeting, into that whole process. So you hear a lot of people talking about social networks. And so social networks are like, very close friends or people you associate with on a personal basis, right? So if I know these 3 guys here on the panel, it's more likely that I could get them involved in something than someone from the back who doesn't know them at all. So I think, again, involving someone from the population to actually help with recruitment actually helps. And then the term incentive comes into play in terms of retention. And that's a tricky issue because, I feel like sometimes we feel like people definitely require something for their time, but at the same time, we want people to genuinely kind of want to be involved. So it's hard sometimes to strike a balance in terms of, offering people something and understanding what that something might be, right? So we have to also understand the needs of the individuals that we're looking for too. So a CVS gift card doesn't work for everybody who may not have a CVS in their area.
Derek, do you have something to add?
It sounds so bad, I kind of don't know. What was the question?
So the question was, what are effective strategies for recruitment and retention?
Sorry.
It's okay, you just...
So I guess I can piggyback on what Jay said. I'm using the social networks because peers are going to influence their peers to either participate in the intervention, they're going to influence them about the quality of services that the agency provides. So for me, I think it's one of the best, using the youth to actually somewhat do the recruitment for you, and also making sure that you build your relationship and rapport with the community or the population that you're trying to target, and also making sure that your staff are culturally competent too. That will help with retaining the youth and services as well.
Richard, I'm going to turn the next question over to you. And start with that. Which is, in your experience, what are some of the best practices that you've encountered for implementation and engaging Black and Latino young men or sexual men into these interventions?
So in my experience, I believe that becoming more personal with youth, it's a good way to do that. Also, utilizing every kind of resources that is available at your agency is definitely important. You just don't want to stick to the intervention itself. You want to be able to really utilize everything your agency has to offer.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that around best practices? Anyone else on the panel?
I mean, ideally, young people have a lot of needs, and if you want them to come to your organization, you need to get to the root of their needs. And if their needs are homelessness, if their needs are poverty, if their needs are stigma, then you need to talk to them first before they even talk about HIV. So at the end of the day, you're not going to reach a young person, you're not going to reach a community if you don't get to what the root of their issues are. And until we can formulate other interventions or other groups or other practices along with that, these interventions won't necessarily work because young people are tired of hearing about it. They grew up with HIV. HIV has been around for them for 30 plus years now. And a lot of us are older than that, so we had to fight that epidemic. We had to fight the fight, but a lot of young people don't have to fight the fight. They think a pill and you're fine. And then we have to go back to re-education, re-education, re-education. So I just think if you get to the root of the issues of whatever happens at home, whatever happens at school, whatever's happening outside the other HIV field, then you'll get them into the door and you'll get them retention and you'll get them services.
Chris, you mentioned a couple of things. You talked about stigma, and you also mentioned the agencies and their ability to meet the needs of the young person. So what role do stigma and maybe agencies, kind of placement in the community, their reputation have in engaging young men with sex with men into these services? Jay, could you start?
Sure. Stigma is another really big one. I think, the approach has to almost be from two levels, so to speak. So one is in terms of like understanding who the young men are that you're trying to reach, right, and what stigmas mean to them. So what are the highlighted stigmas in their community in terms of specifically, what do they believe other young gay men believe about being HIV positive, what's the risk around being HIV positive, right? So then you have to go even a little further. I think an agency would have to understand that first, right? To understand how you may actually do some outreach and get them kind of engaged and wanting to sit down and come to your groups or what have you. Then after you get them there and you get them talking, you also then begin to see a little bit more how the stigma is impacting them, or even more so like what internalized issues have now developed based on like really approaching or digesting or trying to negotiate, I should say, stigmas in the world. So what are these stigmas now making them believe about themselves? Not to mention the fact that stigma may have also prevented them initially from seeking some form of help, or even trusting a certain intervention, and even more specifically being suspect, let's say, of a particular agency, right? Not using the addict as an example, but if, for instance, an agency was seen as a white gay male agency, and they're now targeting black young MSM, that could seem a reach for the individuals in the community. It's like, oh, who are they? We've never been there before, and so an agency really has to think about those types of things. And again, I think if you involve, or if a community sees you involving members of their community into their intervention, then that can help address some of like the stigmas that initially are there.
And stigma, I think, is a big, really broad word. Can anyone here talk about what are some of the types, I guess, for lack of a better word, types of stigma that you've heard the young people name for you, or that they're experiencing?
I think, again, the first thing that comes to mind is like, I think a lot of people feel like, the stigma of HIV, for young people specifically, is like it's seen as something, for lack of a better word, using their word, something nasty, right? And so that individual, they know it exists, they know that individuals are there, and what I've seen is that most young people are believing that those individuals who are HIV positive will like kind of step back and almost disappear from the community. That makes it more comfortable for them. I believe that so they don't have to address some of their worries and their fears about what that means. And so it's really, you have to take your hat off, so to speak, to the young people who really want to stand up, and speak out about being HIV positive. And so it's really, and remain in the present, so to speak, right, to the young people who notice and visible, and like that. So the number one thing right now. So it's really, and remain in the present, like kind of like the death sentence, as well as someone making further judgments about your sexual behavior, right? Because that's what it boils down to. So I'm nasty because I was obviously having sex with a lot of people, or somebody I shouldn't have been having sex with, and you may not even know how much sex I was having, but now you're thinking I'm having a lot of sex. That's what it boils down to.
And Jay had touched on the point about behavior, but it's also a stigma on appearance, and it's a stigma on appearance from the agency, what the perception of the agency is. If, say, for example, your agency is Mazzoni Center, and it's a GLBT agency, then the perception of the community, that's the only gay organization that exists in the city of Philadelphia, or they're not really specific for heterosexuals. Also, if we're talking about Latino YMSM, I don't specifically deal with Latino YMSM because of my target population, and also the stigma played on me is that I'm perceived to be Latino after 18 years in the field. And what happens is that when we have agencies that actually target these communities, we don't have English, we don't have Spanish-speaking brochures, we don't have people who are bilingual in the door, we don't have, so we play a stigma within our own communities, how trying to service these people, or trying to service a community that's still being underserviced at the end of the day. So when you ultimately feel like stigma is being part of this happening all around until we're able to target agencies and actually target populations that we're targeting, or actually get them through the door, because there are populations that we're not reaching, that we all see all the time, that we get through our doors that service agencies, but we don't see the ones that don't speak English, that are immigration status, or people who are actually just poor and can't get the center city. So personally, I think we need to do a better job.
Chris, we Latinos just want to claim you.
I'm down for the cause.
So I've heard a couple of challenges that folks are mentioning. So Chris, you were mentioning potentially just the lack of resources to really serve all the different populations that are out there of young men. And then Jay, you were talking about perceptions of agencies and just internalized stigma that young people have. So what are some other challenges that are involved specifically in implementing these the community level and group level interventions? So Rich, could you start us with that one?
Sure. I think one of the challenges is that when implementing the intervention is that for the youth to actually take on the information and actually diffuse the information into the community. I think that's a big problem because a lot of times with the facilitators themselves, their youth are unable to relate to them. So I believe it's really important for youth to relate to whoever is doing the education. And I think that's really important. In my experience, I find that youth really look up to, they listen to someone who acts, looks, and comes from the same community as them. And I think there's a lack of facilitators and educators who are from the community, who look like the community they're trying to save, and educators who are from the community, who look like the community they're trying to save.
So for me, my challenge was I have an intervention that was geared towards older. So for me, my challenge was I have an intervention that was geared in 1989, and our video has Billy Ocean in the background and things of that nature. So you have to adapt these interventions or curtail them to the populations that you're serving. And it's kind of hard when the population keeps changing. Every year, younger people come out younger and younger. You have to find a new freshness, a new newness for the intervention. You yourself have to find the energy to want to find this freshness and newness. So, I mean, for me, challenges happen when you walk across that door. If your front desk person is not culturally competent or knowledgeable of your intervention or knowledgeable of the agency period, then you lose services. If you yourself are burnt out and do not care about the population see this. Young people see this all the time. Everyone sees but you don't see, and you might be portraying. So at the end of the day, it's a lot of challenges, but there's a lot of solutions and a lot of successes at the same time, because we've all done this work for a long time, so I guess we know how to be innovative, but we can't do this work for the rest of our lives. You know what I mean? You want new leaders to grow in progress, and then when you see a population or a target population that feels burdened or downtrodden, then how do you get those leaders to feel a little bit more better about themselves? How do you get those interventions that were made 20 years ago new?
So today is, about prevention, it's about justice. There's a lot of call to action today, and I think Chris is, kind of calling us to action on that, which is that there needs to be a fostering of future leaders and involving more community members in these interventions. So, do you have suggestions for our audience about how that might happen, or letting people know how they can get involved?
I mean, you can call one of us. We can train y'all. That's not a problem. You can check your own biases at the door. Remember that you were a young person once. I mean, not every young person is a hooligan or a flash mobber or somebody that's going to rob you. People are people. You never know what happens behind closed doors. So I say ask questions, talk to them, have a conversation, have a sit down. It's not hard to have a conversation. And if you don't know their lingo, then ask. If they want to say ya mean all day long, then let them say that. Let them be them. But at the end of the day, then also give them some tools and educational skills to talk a little bit properly as well. Don't be judgmental.
How about some other folks? How do you mentor or bring new leaders up? Because I know I've seen you all do it. So how do you guys do it? What are your suggestions?
I think just think like just meeting them where they're at, just be relatable to them, understand them, talk to them like Chris said. Someone will talk to you if you meet them where they're at, and not be as judgmental as a lot of people are.
And pizza works.
Pizza does work. Feed them.
Derek, you're going to add something.
I was going to say, I think it also starts with finding out what they're intrinsically motivated by, like what are their motivators. And once you can actually identify like what motivates them within, then you can try to take that and build upon that to help like with the cause that you're trying to do. Like use their strengths to work in your favor. Like we're really just using them to do the work for you. Like and that's how it should be. We're going to engage them like in this process. So just kind of making it easier for you, but just taking a little time out to find out what their trigger is, like what is it that's gonna like really get them to bite, So
I think for myself working with young gay men specifically, really just want you to like honestly show up and be genuinely interested, like Derek is saying, in who they are and what they're about, right? Like I think that's the easiest and the easiest way to really like connect with them. And once they see that you are consistent, about being interested and asking questions, then they really are actually seeking your advice. And before you know it, they make you the mentor. You don't have to go into it, thinking you have to, all right, I'm the mentor, this is what I want to say to you, this is what I want to make you do or understand. It's about, just talking with them. And very quickly, actually, you'll see that they make you the mentor. And they actually verbalize that. And I think that has worked best for me when I just kind of slow down and let them kind of direct it a little bit, Knowing my intention from the beginning in terms of wanting to make a connection. But seriously seeing that was honestly what worked, that simply was kind of showing up. And even at our agency specifically, having volunteers, those who are consistent about their volunteering, how you get people say, oh, I want to volunteer, they come once, they maybe come twice, and they think they did what they needed to do, right? But with a young person, they need to see you be consistent. So you can't show up once or twice because they've had those individuals in their lives and unfortunately out of their lives. So they need to see you consistently on some level of time, again, being genuinely interested in what it is they're doing.
Also, real quick, in my experience, I find that youth really respond to people who are actually out in the community and they see in the community and not just behind the desk or in the office. So show your face because it works.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
And it's funny because that actually brings up another challenge. I think for especially the men you see before you is in many agencies, the individuals working with the clients aren't the same individuals that they would see in their communities, right? So I think for a lot of us, we had to really think about, did we want to take that role on? We signed up for a job, let's say 8 hours, but we all work more than that. But we signed up for a particular job, and then you leave your job and you realize, I like to walk through 13th Street for whatever reason. And so when I walk through 13th Street, hey, hi Jay, how you doing? Who's that? Who you with? I didn't realize I had to be on point like that. So I do think I didn't realize I had to be wanting to reveal yourself. It makes a difference for the young people because again they see who you really are. But at the same time it is a challenge because I have to realize that I've lost some personal time in a lot of ways, right? So if I have a date, I'm not going to walk down 13th Street because I got too many questions from the date and from the young people. And so that is a real challenge in terms of how we decide to negotiate and navigate our lives in front of the young people and not be secretive, right? Because again, gay young people specifically, they already know about secrets and what people don't like and understand. So if they see me in the world like that too, then that just plays that out. So I don't want to show that. And I can honestly say I didn't really come to the attic being the most out person, but it's been quite a process coming out with the young people, because the levels of coming out happen for a lot of people. So.
And with the non-traditional 40-hour work week, it shows that we have passion. So if you have passion or compassion or empathy for these young, or for communities, period, for each other, then it brings people to your spot. It brings people to you. It brings people around you that are positive, or something that are willing to learn or eager to do something. A lot of young people don't know about our agencies, period. Just because they come to them, don't really know what we do because they know we get free food, we know they give a group, they know we do this. And don't knock it. Free food works. It really does work. At the end of the day, you can get 30,000 young people to come for something that's free. But will they retain it when you leave? Or you personally, are you the one that should be at the front line because you're not passionate enough to give them the free food or that token that they need? But are you that passionate to give them the education that they really deserve? And at the end of the day, that's what we all are here to do, try to give them the education that they deserve.
So, yes, I'd like to open it up to anyone else. Sir, in the back.
Yes, thank you very much for your good work. I run a charity, Christian charity, and we help low-income inner city young people. So I just throw out these two things I think it might help you. The first thing we stress is total love and respect for those with same-sex orientation and desire. There is no basis biblically for hating or condemning anyone with same-sex orientation and desire. And we have to end this hate. And of course, then the second thing we stress, there will be some differences of opinion on this, is abstinence. The biblical position no sexual relations outside of marriage between man and woman. So I would urge people to focus on abstinence as a successful strategy.
Abstinence is a choice.
I mean, I totally agree with him. I mean, regardless, we live in a sexual society. We live in a sexual world. We live in conservative Philadelphia. I'm a Philadelphian. I know we live between DC, New York, where you can hold your hand with your partner down the street and sometimes be all right. In Philadelphia, it's getting all right, but it's not really all right. You can get married in Jersey across the bridge, but you can't come here and get benefits for your partner that much. So, ultimately, I believe that if we do teach people or young people abstinence, I mean, regardless, it's still their choice, but it's still something to teach them because they need to know that they have a right whether to open their legs or not. If you see it on TV at 3 years old that I can see on a movie with watching my mother that a girl's walking out naked and having sex, then that's all I might know. Or if I see my parents having sex, or if I see my younger or older brother having sex, then that's all I know. And then what else is there to know? No one's teaching them abstinence anymore. Everyone's teaching them condom prevention.
And I really do think it is a misconception that our interventions don't emphasize or highlight like abstinence, right? And so I think, you know, the idea is that yes, we believe that a lot of young people are sexual and having sex, you know, but when you're talking to people and getting them to self-identify what their risks are and thinking about what decisions they're making, certainly abstinence comes into play there, right? And so sometimes they don't really know that word, or that could be another stigma as well, right? You know, what someone wants me to believe about having sex and things like that. But once you just get them to really relate to the material and what the choices are, when you're certainly a decision not to have sex, not to have as much sex, and not to have sex with everybody, certainly abstinence comes into play there, right? And so sometimes they don't really know that word, but that could be another stigma as well, right? You know, what someone wants me to believe about having sex and things like that. But once you just get them to really relate to the material and what the choices
More specifically about how you use it, I know my agency is kind of outlines how we go about that.
Yeah, I think social media is one of the biggest challenges for a lot of agencies because a lot of the young people are way ahead of us, right? And they have no boundaries in terms of how they're using social media, which creates extra boundaries for us because, you know, as a agency, you have a lot more boundaries, right? And so we feel like you have to be involved on some level with social media and you have to figure out like the best way to kind of like safeguard it, right? And so I think, you know, at Safeguards and Brothers United, they have a really good example of how they've used like Facebook and gotten people to really like sign on to being involved in a group, you know, and all different types of people involved in the group as well, you know, which kind of helps to like monitor it on some level.
We actually, some of our opinion leaders, we actually assign some of our opinion leaders to monitor the Facebook group page. So it's their job and their duty to actually really monitor the whole thing. And we also have a policy. We were able to develop some policies around Facebook and the group page with an intern that we had. So it's a whole different. We have about 4 or 5 pages of just policies around usage and Facebook postings and things like that.
Can you give a couple examples of policies that you?
So I mean, we're always posting disclaimers about using vulgar languages, pictures. It's not a dating site, so we frequently post those things. We also limit the amounts of postings for like different ads. We really try to keep the posts in the group pages around prevention. So that's how we do it.
And what are their responsibilities around monitoring? Because I think that's helpful.
Do you mean the opinion leaders or the person who monitored?
What are their responsibilities?
I mean, they check it every day. They're on it every day, and that's pretty much what they do. They're on the page. We have over 1,800 members on the group page, so it's a big group page. So we assign a few people who are responsible to actually look at the post every day. So they're frequently looking at the group pages to see what's on there.
Good.
And I would also say, like I said, make sure you just have policies in place that are going to, protect confidentiality of clients and also support back at the agency, but also using, like making sure that like the kosher or relevant to the population that you're trying to reach. And like Rich said, having some of their opinion leaders do that, have them post on their page or have them post specifically to your page, because it's going to see that they're engaged, it's going to go through their friends. So just really taking that whole standpoint of building these leaders and having them, again, do the work for you. I say that a lot, but, you know, just have them, with close monitoring, of course, but just kind of have them post stuff and like invite and whatnot, and that'll help a little bit, I think. I think that.
Yes.
Usually what we do is we would send them a message first, and if they do it again, they're usually deleted out of the group.
That's pretty straightforward, yes. In the back, please.
Next is something with boundaries. How do you guys deal with boundaries, keeping it professional, and then, because I know teenagers, if they find somebody that they respect, they don't want to be with that person, and they kind of want to see you live at, or you hang out at, how do you guys, they don't want to be with that person, and they kind of want to see you live at.
This is going to sound really. So I have a clear rule. This is I'm a nonprofit kid. I've been doing this work since I was 15. That when I turned 24, 25, that I wouldn't date anybody underneath 24, 25, that was my target population. So to me, they're all 12. Because by law, statutorily raped. You know what I mean? That's how I think of these. Because regardless, there's young people who hit on us all the time. We can go down the street. We were just at Pride working, and a whole bunch of half-naked people all around in 95-degree weather is somewhat tantalizing. But if you think of them, they're all 12. Then they're all 12 to me. So there's that. And fortunately for me, I also like older people. So.
Speaking from the older person. What has worked for me, and I never said I would admit this out loud, you know, so I am the oldest gay man most of my young people know, and so I have accepted myself as their grandfather, and I don't say that out loud, right? You know, but that helps create a boundary, right? And then even further, again, about being genuine in your process, right? And so when a young person wants to cross a boundary or wants to seem flirtatious, because it's what they know, right? It gets comfortable, they want to trust you, and yes, they usually in those situations is someone that has somehow turned sexual, right? And so you as a mentor, as an adult, need to reframe that, you know, and simply say, you know what, you don't have to do this. This is not that kind of part.
Totally agree.
Anybody else on the panel want to address that? That's okay, enough said. Yes. Sir.
My question is around cultural competency. So coming from an organization that's not LGBT specific and working on an intervention that targets Black and Latino and MSM, how do we get the staff, the rest of the staff, like to be culturally competent? Get the staff, like the rest of the staff, like to be culturally competent? Get the staff,
Okay,
like the
so
rest of the staff.
Nancy asking about cultural competence and working specifically with Latino and African American young men. How do you generate a culturally competent staff or agency? Is that?
Yeah.
So, all right, I think we have to put cultural competence into context. Like, you can learn to be competent with a specific culture. However, it's really about the agency accessibility. Kind of like assessing the person of whether or not they're culturally competent to deal with a specific population. So that should be a responsibility of the agency, and it also should be a responsibility of the person that's providing services as well. Because you can learn, like I said, you can learn like the factors or everything that's written in the book, but you can't necessarily teach somebody to relate or how to do that. So, I mean, you can have them go to training, but like there comes a point where they're still going to be capped in their ability to really be culturally competent. And it's also, I think it's important to identify what that means for the agency and what that means for you. Because just because you're Black and you work with Black and YMSM does not necessarily mean that you're culturally competent. Because, you know, that includes, like, we look at the different communities with inside the overall LGBT community that we have to think. Like somebody who's never stepped foot into a ball may not be culturally competent to work with the ball and kids. But if that person, if we piggyback on some other stuff that you said, if that person is a leader in the community, has that nurturing or just that ability to kind of just be that person to be present for the young people, it is possible. So I think it's all about the individual. So.
And an experience is that, it's just that. When you have an experience, if you don't come to the ball community, you go to a ball, now you have an experience. And then you either talk about it or disregard it. And if you want to work with a population, then you talk about it. And you expand your knowledge. And then you become a little bit more competent in your cultural ways.
I think a couple of people have said, showing up, being present, really important. Exposure, listening, and exposing yourself, not just exposing the young people to messages that you want them to take on, but exposing yourself to what they're doing. Noah?
Hi. How do your interventions measure efficacy and outcomes? Because I know that can be really tricky, and we are facing a lot of incidents prevalence here in Philadelphia, and each of your interventions are beautiful things that can really impact this incidence of HIV amongst young MSM. So I'm curious about how your particular programs measure efficacy and outcomes that you.
So the question is, how do their programs measure efficacy and outcomes?
So I'll start. So for me, doing Hype for 4 years, formerly known as Many Voices, there was a point in time where I couldn't get rid of the young people that came. They would come once a month. A lot of them had needs. A lot of them were food. Some of them were tokens. But ideally, they came and they listened to the same intervention for a year, for once a month, for a year, for 3 days. And so what we did was, we now have a core group, which they're now young leaders. So now they get trained on a lot of things so they can train their peers. And so when we have groups now in 3 months or 6 months after that, when we have a touch base of what you've changed and what you've learned and what you haven't changed and why you haven't changed it, then the young people get to step up and say, hey, well, maybe this rate of infection is here, or this rate of infection is there, or did you know that STDs are more on the rise in our community? And did you know how to put a condom correctly? Oh, well, you didn't want to do one, that's fine. But you can go back to doing that. So I utilize young people that come step up and say, hey, I maybe touch base with this rate of infection is here, or this rate of infection is there, or did you know that STDs are more on the rise?
I think that was a great question.
Did you know how to put a condom correctly? Oh, you didn't want to do one, that's fine. You can go back and go back to that. So I utilize young people
resource
step up.
manual and the implementation manual of how to evaluate and monitor the program. But I think part of the challenge is making sure that the agencies take that a step further and looking at it from outside of the numbers. Like if your objectives are reach 40 clients in a group level intervention, just because you hit your target, like was that really successful? Like making sure that you continually engage the clients in follow-up surveys to make sure that they're actually practicing and building on these skills. So I think that should happen internally. Like I can't speak specifically for every agency, but that's something that when implementing these behavioral interventions, like you sometimes have to take it a step above like what's directly in that manual. Otherwise, like we're just doing the work and getting the numbers, and that's the extent of it. But is it really effective?
So one way that we measure outcome at our agency for our program is that we have conversation logs. When we train our opinion leaders, they are responsible for having, we have conversations go out. When we train our opinion leaders, they are responsible for having, we have conversations. And one way when we measure whether or not they're having these conversations is that they have to turn in a conversation log with the 10 conversations. What was talked about, who did you speak to, where, and things like that. So we know the conversations are happening out there in the community.
And I think for the addict, we're in a pretty unique situation in terms of we are delivering a community level intervention, but yet we are our own community as well. And so whereas a plus there is we actually serve young people from 13 to 23 at our agency. And so I could very well have like face-to-face contact with a young person over an extended period of time. And so being able to share information internally between like group level interventions and individual level interventions, and even some conversations, most appropriately of course, with therapists as well, you can get, a broader context, right? And so like Derek is saying, you do want to take it a step further, and then unfortunately unfortunately, most of our agencies aren't funded to the level that are real, to do a real evaluation, right? And so we're talking about evaluation based on, what we can see and measure, most simply, of course, but looking for opportunities to kind of like partner with universities or, research departments at hospitals and things like that, really help you to do a better job at evaluating to really get some details.
And another way, in my experiences that we've been able to measure outcome is through our Facebook page. On our page, the opinion leaders that we train, they're the ones asking, questions on the page now. They're the ones who are starting conversations with the 1,800 members who are part of the Facebook page. So we see it happening live.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
I want to say like for me being a video video, it's like I still have questions that stuff that I don't know yet. Stuff that I'm still learning. Like it's a lot of times, a lot of opinion leaders or go to a peer education class. Once you get stuff taught, you still don't know what's the questions of certain things. But a lot of organizations, they give you they don't give you the most important piece to get. They'll give you the most important piece to tell. They give you what you should know, but not the serious part. And my question was, my question to you guys is like, I know Facebook is big, but do y'all like interact on the other websites that DDC go on? DDC, A4A?
So the question is around interacting or engaging with other social networking sites outside of Facebook.
Right.
We sure do. A4A, BGC, Eric Albert, who works for Reach, always does outreach on those sites and talks to young people and gets them into services. He works for Missouri Center. So, I mean, everything isn't going to be for all of us, but our agencies, our prospective agencies are doing these things for communities that we don't see all the time as well. Unfortunately, we can't always get them to come down to our organization. We can't get their buy-in, but we do reach them in some type of way. At least if we give them education or a tidbit, hey, use a condom with your one trick tonight.
I also want to make sure we're staying in the context of an effective behavioral intervention. So, not a potential barrier, but like these interventions are researched a certain way. So unless you go through the proper adaptation process, by just adding other components or other mechanisms, you take away from the efficacy or the fidelity of the intervention. So sometimes it's hard to actually, it's not hard, it's challenging to be creative with some of the other avenues that you can take unless you go through a process of making sure that you adapt the intervention correctly. So I just kind of wanted to make that point.
Right, the W's are within a certain framework, but that doesn't mean that folks aren't working outside of that, doing other things. That's kind of what I'm hearing you guys say. Yes?
Right, actually going right along with that, we implement curriculum for the middle school and high school that is an evidence-based curriculum, so we are very limited in the adaptations that we can do. So one of the ways that we've sort of been trying to make our intervention more effective is to increasing the cultural competency. Unfortunately, a lot of the tools and resources that we found have focused on ethnicities and sort of that avenue. So I was wondering if y'all had any specific examples for the sort of LGBTQ, MSN, ways to sort of enhance cultural competency. If you have any trainings or anything like that that we could actually send our team through.
So there are definitely various agencies that offer trainings that can do some very specific trainings. The Attitude Center happens to be one. We have a department called the Bryson Institute, and so that training actually is a best practices type of training, like how do you work with LGBTQ young people, how do you know who they are, understand what their issues are. In terms of an agency, really kind of identifying what seems to be like the issues in the agency that is preventing people to either connect or not even identify their biases, right? And I think, from a professional standpoint, you're trying to understand how you can get staff to go along a continuum of acceptance, tolerance, and, really identifying what is happening in the agency to understand that. But I think also what's unique about our particular training is we bring a panel of young people with us, and so young people, or I should say, young people get to tell their stories to an audience, which again makes it more of a real type of factor in terms of the learning and things like that.
And at Mazzoni Center, I'm part of the education team, and we have a best practice document for Trans 101. We have a best practice document for working with LGBT clients, LGBTQI clients, the whole alphabet. And I mean, ultimately, you just research and find organizations within your region or in your city that you could probably just like reach out to and say, come and give us a little bit more education or feedback on how we can do this better.
And these, I know that you can contact the Breast Institute and they will happily come to you. And then some of the manuals that you're talking about, Chris, are those shareable or those internal?
They're shareable, I believe.
Okay.
I can find out from my supervisor.
Okay, so you can contact them. Anybody else have any suggestions, curricula, best practices? Other questions? Yes, Alicia, welcome.
Hi. I know that all of these interventions do not necessarily lead to testing. So how do you balance that? How, I mean, given that we know that, this is a population at great risk, how do you, or can you, in terms of the efficacy, can you add testing to these interventions? Or is that, how do you do it?
Good question. Rich, why
Well,
don't you start?
I am Brothers United. I'm a CTR specialist there, so there is definitely a testing component with the community level intervention D-Up. What we do is it's possible. We're trying to reduce the rates of HIV infection, so we really want to be able to, we're trying to utilize all the resources that we have available, and HIV testing is just one of those resources. So, we have our opinion leaders out there having a lot of conversations, and pretty much it's their job for them to come out and offer their friends testing, and that's what they do. That's what they do, and they usually come up to me and ask me, "Can you test my friend?" I just had a conversation with them, so it's definitely possible, and it is happening.
And through my intervention, it's 7 sessions. So there's one of the last 2 sessions is input for community, other community members to come in and talk about other things. And usually what I have, the HIV testers from our organization. I'm also a trained HIV tester. So and I try to normalize HIV and STDs because they're all STDs. So HIV is a big focus for a lot of people, and it's not my big focus. STDs are my bigger focus because if you have 12 new cases of whatever every year, that's a problem for me. When I was younger, you didn't have oral gonorrhea, oral syphilis, and oral chlamydia. You just had regular these things. Now it's like oral. So, and a lot of young people don't know that whatever in the back of your throat, you need to get checked out. It might not be a cough. It might not be a sore throat. It might not be just a cold. So, fortunately for me, I do work from Mazzoni Center, and we do have a medical center, and we do have an off-site, and we do have those things. So we are able to refer. I know a lot of smaller agencies are not able to do that, so we do collaborate with them. Then, we have a mobile testing unit where we have these things that, when you have these interventions, are actually accessible for the population at that time, for that time. If your intervention happens at midnight, then you need to test at midnight, because then they might not come back the following month.
Well, real fast, like Chris said, with 3 and V, like there's a session in there that talks about testing. The same as with a lot of the other group level interventions that I've been trained in, and also with the community level interventions. When we talk about the ones that work specifically with like social networks and changing social norms, DIA, POL, even with empowerment, they have their training sessions, which they can be adapted. So it's really about how you adapt some of those training sessions to reflect the needs of the community too. So those are things that can be modified and adapted. And if testing is a need in the community, then you should adapt that and make that as part of the training session. If that's the norm of the value you're trying to change in the community, then that should definitely be a focal point also. So there's ways to incorporate it when you're doing these activities.
Other questions? We still have a few minutes.
Yes. I want to know, how do you in y'all personal experience, how do y'all deal with somebody who doesn't necessarily identify as gay or just sleeps with women or kids with men, but just how do y'all get to them? How do y'all get to those type of people?
So the question is, how do they engage young people, young men specifically, young men who come but don't necessarily identify as being gay or bisexual and may say that they are having sex with women?
Yeah. So how do y'all get to those people and try to get them to use protection when necessarily don't say that they have sex?
So how do you work with young people who are questioning, perhaps, having struggle, but still get the prevention messages across to them?
Exactly.
Yeah, how do you do that?
So fortunately for me, I'm bubbly, and people have a lot of judgments and misperceptions of me until they talk to me. And ironically enough, the young man who asked the question, has also been one of those young people that you're able to reach out to and make sure that they know that they're worth. And as long as you make sure that they know that what their worth is, then you reach them and you talk to them, you be real with them. And then that's when they reach out to their communities and their prospective communities.
Yeah, and I think when you are kind of, again, genuinely reaching out using social networks, then in my social network, just because I identify as a gay male doesn't mean that everyone in my network identifies very specifically in that way. But I still have a relationship with those individuals to invite them to groups and things like that to get them to hear the information. When you're trying to really create a norm, then somewhere in there, you're trying to get everybody to just kind of accept who's at the table wanting the information. I'm glad you mentioned that point too, because I think again, in terms of misconceptions, we want to believe that all the, same gender loving individuals are only having sex with the same gender. When in terms of young people, and people questioning and or experimenting with their sexuality period, they may have or could be, continuing to have sex with various genders, even though they're identified out loud in one particular way. So it's definitely a conversation you have to be open to and willing to incorporate.
Any last questions? I want to turn it over to the panel, give you an opportunity to give closing remarks, leaving us with your last words of wisdom, your pearls, if you will, secrets. So, whoever would like to start.
Wow. So one of the things I feel that have been successful for me, since I've been doing this work, especially with YSF, it's really, like a lot of the panelists said, being present in their lives and kind of extending yourself to an extent beyond the regular 9 to 5 and actually caring about their needs. And that's easier because, I guess it's kind of easier being part of the community. So this actually, it's not only about how it affects you, it affects me as well. So really just being genuine and but caring for the participants that you serve or your clients, not looking at them specifically as clients, but as individuals, and actually being genuinely concerned for their well-being and the well-being of the community. I think that's one thing that I would say take home.
I think for me, it's definitely about the work continuing, getting everyone to commit to continuing to engage young people in this conversation, right? And then my latest soapbox in terms of adapting interventions or my worry about interventions, what I believe I've seen that's really missing, and this sounds very cheesy, I know, right? But sometimes cheesiness is it, right? So what I see is missing is a real conversation about love, LOVE, and true intimacy, right? So in all our interventions, we're talking about behaviors, we're telling you what not to do, and all those types of things, right? But when we get into the details of what a young man is addressing on those particular sites, what a young man might be addressing in the real world when he meets someone that he thinks he can trust, is that moment where everything I know, I'm willing to take a risk for, because this man is going to finally give me something I haven't gotten, love.
So, I'll just say that, if we really want to reach youth and understand them, I'll go back to consistency and to just be consistent with them. That plays a really major role in whether or not, they're going to access the services that they were providing. Also, just remember to manage your own discomforts. Meet them where they're at, because that's really important in making sure that we reach the.
So many things to say. I guess the 3 points I will leave is to remember everyone's a client, even yourself. So when you talk to young people or you talk to anyone who's a client, just remember that you were in that position with someone else at one point in time. If your agency really is going to be culturally competent and say that you're going to deal with populations, then make sure all your materials reflect those. If you're dealing with trans, then they should have trans-specific things. If you're dealing with Latinos, then you should probably have Spanish-speaking brochures and materials in your agencies, especially if you're dealing with Haitian or Russian, because we have big populations in the Pennsylvania area as well. So, and they're all having sex. Everybody's infected. And my last thing is just be real. Ask questions. If you don't know the answer, then say, I don't know the answer. That's better than giving someone an answer that you don't know.
Well, I really want to thank you for your participation and all of your wonderful questions. Can we please give our esteemed guest really my pleasure, gentlemen, as always.
Good morning.
Thank you. And our pleasure. We have a few minutes, and I'm sure our panel is available if you have any further questions. And again, please feel free to contact anyone.
Please feel free to fill out your evaluation.
And thank you, Chris. You are the lovely young lady here is going to flag for you.